Peace and blessings to you, my beloved faith family, and welcome to GNN, the Good News Network, where we seek to accentuate the positive and eliminate the negative in the midst of a global health pandemic that is presenting itself on many different fronts in our society today. Our mantra, as always, is I am here. Again, I am here. And those three powerful words, I am here, contain the essence of the divinity of our identity, namely that we are spirit beings, robed or clothed in flesh. We are spiritual beings practicing to be human, not human beings attempting to become spiritual. And if we focus on that connection that we have with our Creator, who is also our heavenly parent, we will be able to unleash the divine traits, characteristics, and attributes of God that reside within each and every one of us and do the things, accomplish the things that only God can do. God has promised it. All things are possible for those of us who believe. And if we would but come more and more into a divine spiritual consciousness of our identity, our reason for existing, we will be able to follow and follow the path that leads to a fulfillment of the original plan for which God created us. We can have not only a more abundant life, but eternal life. I am George Augustus Stallings Jr., the patriarch and founder of Imani Temple African American Catholic Congregation, headquartered in Suitland, Maryland, within the shadow of the capital of the United States of America, where His Excellency, the Most Reverend James Rodney Watson, is the provincial bishop, and where we also have our international headquarters located. Today is election day in the United States of America. We are at what is called the midterm elections. And if you did not vote already, or you did not submit an absentee ballot, I cannot exhort you enough to please go and exercise your democratic right to vote for the candidates that you feel will best represent not only you, but the people of your city, your state, your country, as well as what will be the best, at least from your perspective, for the citizens of the United States. Please go to your comment section on your viewing page and type in those three words, I am here, which is your affirmation that as a God in G minor, as a little God in G minor, you have a responsibility not only to be fruitful and to multiply, but to take dominion over the earth. And therefore, we must be very much concerned about those persons whom we place in political office. Do they have the objective of serving the people or being served? Do they see themselves as a servant rather than a lord over others? Do they see their calling as one of living for the sake of others, or just simply to exert power, prestige, and position in an attempt to see themselves as better than the rest of us, rather than the servant of the servants among us? Today is election day in the United States of America. Men and women shed their blood, lost their lives to give you and me the right to exercise the democratic right of voting in an election. It is appalling to see the low percentage of Americans who vote, yet at the same time, the majority of Americans do not exercise their constitutional right to vote. It is ensured in the Constitution of the United States, the right to vote. The majority of Americans do not vote in any given election cycle. What is wrong with us? We could change this nation. We could inaugurate the kingdom of God, aka the kingdom of heaven here on earth, if we all exercise our constitutional right to vote. Especially those of us who are minorities, who are African American, who for centuries could not vote. We could not make our voices heard. Now we have the right, as any other American citizen, to cast one vote, a ballot for the candidate or candidates of our choice. Why are we not exercising that constitutional right? It baffles me, especially now if you are a regular voter, even if you are out of the country, as I am on election day. I cast my absentee ballot a month ago. It came in the mail. And knowing that I would not be in the United States of America on this day, November the 8th, 2022, on election day, I cast my ballot for the candidates that I thought would be the best for our city government. In DC, we have no state, so there was no one to vote for as far as the Senate, because we don't have representation in the Senate. We don't have representation. We have a delegate in the House of Representatives, so I could vote for the person, and I supported the person that I felt would be good for the entire community, not just for me. Because if it had just been for me, I wouldn't have voted for that person if it was just only about for me. But I had to look beyond my own personal preferences and cast a ballot for the person that who I thought, would be the best servant of the people, even though the service is questionable at times. So there was no governor's race, and of course this is a midterm, so there was no presidential race. So my voting as a resident of the District of Columbia was limited to the mayor, to the city council. And in fact, my city council member in Ward 8 was not up for reelection, so I didn't have to vote for a city council member. And, one or two persons on the DC Democratic Party. And then one vote, there was one referendum vote to allow the pay increase for waiters to eventually reach a level in the next 2 or 3 years that would be comparable with other jobs. Because waiters, I don't know if you are aware of it, but waiters, persons who wait on tables at restaurants are paid, their basic pay is $5 an hour. They survive on the tips that we provide to them. That is why I'm always generous when I tip, because I realize that there are persons who not only have themselves, but they have families, they have children, grandchildren. You see senior citizens working as waiters. Obviously, they don't have enough income from their previous job or Social Security or pension to survive. They have to do an extra job. They're working at Walmart. They're working as waiters. But waiters in D.C. only given $5 an hour, which is below the minimum wage. And this referendum that we have on the D.C. ballot is to not only allow the waiters to keep their tips, to continue to get their tips, but that it will raise their salaries to a level where it is comparable to other workers in the city. So that was an important vote to cast, because I believe people should have a fair wage. I believe that waiters should receive greater compensation. So I voted for that. I'm not going to tell you who the other people are that I voted for. But the point is, I exercise my constitutional right, because I cannot allow the blood, sweat, and tears of the great civil rights leaders who laid down their lives to give us the right to vote, for their lives to have been lived in vain. In fact, we remember those great civil rights leaders who have physically transitioned yet spiritually ascended, who gave their lives that we might have the right, the constitutional right, guaranteed by the Constitution. That's why I keep saying constitutional right. It's just not a right that is here and there. It is a constitutional right that we can now vote as African Americans, as people of color, as all citizens are entitled to vote. Let us remember them today for all that they sacrificed, the many times they had dogs attack them, fire hoses turned upon them, the many times they suffered disgrace and discrimination because they could not sit at a lunch counter to eat like every other human being, for the times that they were jailed unjustly, the times that their houses were burned, bombs exploding in their houses, the many times that they were kidnapped and killed. You think of Emmett Till, who lost his life as a 15-year-old for having been accused by a white woman of for simply having whistled at her. He was brutally slaughtered, which turned out to be a false accusation. His mother even allowed his coffin to be opened for the funeral service in Chicago, Illinois, because she wanted the world to see what they had done to her son, how they had cruelly beaten him, disfigured him. She allowed for that coffin to remain open so that the world could sympathize with an injustice. And believe it or not, Emmett Till's life, even at 15, was a turning point in the civil rights movement. Not only what Rosa Parks did on December the 1st, 1955, but also how a young teenage boy who was falsely accused of doing something lost his life, brutalized by his attackers over a purported whistle, which never happened. These are the people who lost their lives to fight for freedom, for civil rights, for justice, for people who have been disenfranchised, denied, brutalized, and marginalized. And yet they are not even alive to experience the fruits of just simply going to a polling booth or sending in an absentee ballot in exercising a constitutional right to vote. Let us take 30 seconds to remember them and to pray for their immortal souls, that they may live with God forever. That we thank them for shedding their blood, sweat, and tears for us to have the privilege to vote, and to also to confess our guilt when we should have voted but did not, and only lived to complain about the results of an election that we could have changed, could have made a difference if we all had voted. So when we look at persons who are in office, whether it be from the president down to the city council, and they enact things that disturb us, we need to first of all take a look at the man, the woman in the mirror, to make sure that we exercise our constitutional right to vote. And if we did not, we can blame no one but ourselves for the results. And welcome back to GNN, the Good News Network. Our theme yesterday was very simple. It was entitled, God is relates to the now. I had an interesting conversation with my mother, Dorothy Smith Stallings, and my elder sister, Brenda Stallings Faison, about yesterday's presentation. My mom said I never really had thought about the now, the power of now. As I was walking back to my residence from having had a coffee quiche Lorraine, a fresh fruit of plate, a fresh plate of fruit rather, at a place called the Corner Cafe, I was thinking about the now. And as I walked from the Corner Cafe back to my apartment, I realized that in the split second that I thought about the now, it had already passed. So my head is spinning, and I'm trying to grab a hold of the now. But as soon as I attempt to do it, it's already passed. So I said, what is it about this now? Especially we say that God is. And the only thing that I could surmise when we speak of the present, when we speak of the now, is in that very split second in which it is occurring. But even then, it has passed. So I've come to realize that the present can best be equated with the word always. God is an ever present God, which means that God is always present. To equate the now with always will prevent us from plucking our beard, if we're men, pulling our hair out, if we have any, or being obsessed with the now when we look at it in the context of always. The past is not always, the future is not always, but the present is now. It is always. That allows us to come to the conclusion of our faith, in our faith, that God is, that God is, that God is now, that God is always. God says, I will neither forsake you nor abandon you because I am. You and I say I am, or the contraction I'm, which means or which indicates that there is something about us that is always. It is in the constant now because we are called to relate to God always in this present moment, in this given time. Because if we try to look at the present after we have said the word present, it's already in the past. But if we look at the present as always, it means that it is continuous. It does not end. It has no beginning and it has no end because it is always. That is why we say that God, again, is an ever present God. As I said earlier, God is an ever present God because God is always. The reason why we can count on God no matter what we are going through or what we must endure is because God is always present. Put your life into the hands of the always one. Put your life in the hands of the one who is ever present in the now. And then begin to ask yourself, How do I play a role in this present moment to evolve, to blossom into all that God desired for me before the foundations of the earth were even laid? And how can I be a part of the now, the always? Life is filled with swift transition. None on earth alone can stand. So build your hope on things eternal and hold on to God's unchanging hand. Hold to his hand, God's unchanging hand. Hold to his hand, God's unchanging hand, and build your hope on things eternal, because that is where the present is now, always. Hold to God's unchanging hand. Where is your faith? Is it being experienced in the now? Where is your faith? Is it an every now and then faith? Is it an occasional faith? Is it a faith of desperation or destitution? Is it a faith that only calls on God in an emergency, in hard or difficult times? Is your faith only summoned when you are lying sick or stretched out on your deathbed? Where is your faith? Does it call on God in good times as well as in bad, in sickness as well as in health? Does it call on God in our moments of ecstasy as well as in our moments of agony? Where is our faith in God? Knowing that God is an ever present God, that God is the totality of the now moment, because God is always. Take a few seconds to ask yourself, is my faith strong enough to keep me keeping on in spite of it all? Is my faith strong enough to see what the end is going to be? Is my faith strong enough to bring me to victory? Thank you for not touching that dial. I have come to the conclusion that the only way we are going to have life and have it more abundantly, the only way in which we're going to be able to see through the muck and the mire of everyday existence, to move beyond the trials and tribulations, to deal with the uncertainties of life, with its very tragic and devastating moments and loss, is to develop a spiritual consciousness that always allows us to remember that God is, that we serve a God of the now, that our God is always with us. God is always there. It's that it is we who are often absent from the equation. That's right, God is always there because God is an ever present God. We are the ones who distance ourselves. We are the ones who separate ourselves from the source. We are the ones who lose spiritual contact with God. It's not God. Anytime we lose our way, it's because we have taken our sight off of God. Anytime we feel that life is too much to bear, it's because we have taken our minds off of God. Whenever we run into a situation that seems to discombobulate us, frustrate us, upset us, anger us, disappoint us, it's because we have forgotten that God is a part of the equation. There can be no life apart from God. There can be no breath in this body unless God is present in it. There can be no joy, no happiness, no peace, no fulfillment, no love, no satisfaction, no prosperity, no enjoyment, none of that if God is not at the center of it. God is the one who purifies our thoughts, our intentions, our words, our actions, our deeds, our habits, our character, and it is ultimately to God that we desire to dwell with for eternity, to become a part of the now. That's the beauty of being in communion with God. That is the joy that we can experience because of knowing God, having faith in God, being like Yeshua HaMashiach, Jesus, the Messiah, the Christ, the Anointed One, to become fully God's presence in human form is to maintain that conscious awareness. And it's not easy. It's not easy. But the more and more we encounter the various phases of life, my prayer is that we will more and more depend on God and realize that God is Emmanuel, God with us, that this God will neither forsake us nor abandon us, but is with us always in the now, and that the now will be ours when we have returned unto the source from which we came. That's the joy that we anticipate in our hearts, that one day we too shall be all that God is, that we too shall live forever in the now. May the Lord bless you and keep you. May the Lord be gracious and merciful to you. May the Lord look upon you with kindness and grant you peace. Thank you for tuning into GNN, the Good News Network. Be safe, stay cool, calm, and collected, and let us remember to pray for one another. Same time. See you tomorrow. Same time, same live stream media platform, 12 noon Eastern Standard Time for another live GNN Good News Network broadcast. I love you, man. May have an awesome and blessed day.